We got to talking, Dave. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Boys and Girls Club of Delaware podcast. I'm here with an amazing guest. Now, Dave, when I had to do some research on you, when I was like, this guy did all of this? This guy is amazing. Now, before I dive into what you have done in all of these things that you have encompassed in your career, in your lifestyle, please tell the people who you are.
I think I'll backtrack by saying I'm one of 14 children.
Right.
I have 11 brothers and 2 sisters. 2 brothers, one passed in 1985 and one passed last year. They're both Vietnam veterans. And so it was a really, it gives me a real feeling for our leaders in our country when it comes to our military and those that really sacrifice so much for us. Oddly enough, it happens to be close to Memorial Day right now. But coming from a family that didn't have much, I also recognized the people that were there to help us. And there wasn't many. I think a lot of times people look on the sideline and either ridicule or degrade people that, in this case, having 14 kids. And I could see people being judgmental. And I thought, I'm going to do something when I'm going to achieve something in my life. But at the same time, I'm going to make sure I bring others along with me. And so when I do things, and I think a lot of it is my Christian faith. I grew up as a child at a Pentecostal church, and we used to jam, and we used to go out, and the big thing about the church was helping people. It wasn't about the 4 walls of the church. It was going in the community and making a difference in people's lives. And so I remember my mom ended up becoming a bus pastor, where she would go around the communities and meet with the different communities, and we would go into the low-income communities, and the families were struggling like ours was. Right. And my mom would buy a bag of lollipops, and we would hand them to the other kids and say, if you come on Sunday, we're going to stop at the ice cream store afterwards and get ice cream. So it was a great way for us to evangelize and reach, and most importantly, give other people hope.
Absolutely. Listen, that was great. I have so many questions just off of that. We didn't even get into the intro. Listen, I'm here with, he is the first Delaware boxing champion. He has been voted 50 most influential people in Delaware in the last 50 years. I mean, so many accolades. I'm here with the one and only Dave Tiberi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We didn't even get into the introduction. Like you said, I mean, you're back. Let's just get into your background. Like you said, you were one of 14 children, 11 brothers. How was that growing up, first and foremost?
The question,
with your siblings.
Yeah, well, the joke is that we used to go to boxing. We go to boxing cards, and we would all show up, and the joke was the promoter would say, as long as the Tiberi boys are here, we're going to have a full card. So it wasn't.
And you're the youngest, right?
And I'm the youngest. So
wow.
They said, well, how'd you get into boxing? I said I had 7 older brothers that were boxers. So I had no choice. Actually, the toughest competition I growing up, I always said this was my own siblings, because we were so competitive with one another. And I remember I could not really leave the gym crying. And I used to get frustrated, and I was like, if I go home crying, then it's going to get worse. So I just it made me tougher. But I learned a lot from their styles, and they were very disciplined. Learned a lot about diversity. When you're a boxer, you're in camps with guys from all over the world. And so, some of my best friends, Bernard Hopkins, he lives. I always try to take the credit for him moving to Delaware, but he and I are good friends and camp together. And so, but it's been a blessing that to your question about 11 children, is 11 siblings is. I should say 11 brothers. And
11 brothers.
I don't want to leave my sisters out, because my sisters actually had it tougher than anybody, because the one sister was number 7 and the other sister was number 14.
Wow.
So, we didn't know we were poor. I mean, you just work hard, and you only know what you know at the time. But then as you get older, you're like, wow, those experiences are helping me in so many ways in the outreach and the things that I do today.
Absolutely. I mean, you're doing so many things today. Like you talk about the outreach. Like I said, when I was doing research on you, I was like, wow, this is going to be an amazing interview. This guy's amazing. I mean, as soon as you walked into the room, you brought the energy. I'm like you. I like to bring high energy. And then I shook your hand. I was like, this guy still feels like the champ. And you're still working out now. I take it, right?
Just don't ring any bells. I still work out now. To your question, I still work out now. I get men and women together, and just gives me a great opportunity. I go to Widener University, the psychiatry program, which they work with the caseworkers. I certify caseworkers in self-defense. I'm a big fan of not teaching I'm a big fan of teaching how to communicate from 20 feet, not 2 feet. How to communicate, because when you get in somebody's zone, there can always be a problem. And so the more we learn to communicate instead of dictate, or whatever word people want to use, I'm a big fan of communication, and I always like to teach that, learning body language. And I learned that a lot through Widener in their psychiatry program, because Dr. Gibbings was incredible. She would talk about how you could start diffusing things from 20 feet. And a lot of times that's even in our own relationships.
Absolutely.
When you bring a problem home from work, and next thing you know, it becomes your girlfriend or your wife's problem, or vice versa. And
kids' problems.
Something. So just learning how to say, learning to calm things down before it starts,
Absolutely. Listen, I told you this is going to be a great interview. I'm already excited. I'm looking to get, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a great interview. I already can tell. So I know we talked a little bit, going back to the beginning, how it was growing up, and you had a great career even up to this point. I know you have ERP, but before we even get into that, I think like you talked about boxing a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And I said you was the first Delaware champion, and that was news to me. You know what I mean? But I think we're going to talk about, quote unquote, the decision, right? Yeah. And doing research on you, I found out, when you're a boxing champion, you was fighting over in Atlantic City. Mm-hmm. Who was it? He was the champion at the time. You both were welterweight.
James Toney.
James Toney. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was, they deem it as the decision, but which changed boxing forever after that. And one of the most, they talk about most crucial, what's the word? It
was labeled the most controversial.
Most controversial. I couldn't think of it. Look, I'm so excited. I can't even think about it. The most controversial decision that actually changed boxing. I mean, you had people who were fighting for you. The now president Biden, and you had Senator Roth and Carper. So many people fighting for you when that controversial decision happened. But I was reading a quote that you said when they announced that you weren't the winner, you were expecting to be the new champion, and then when they said you said you questioned God at that moment. And at that moment, of course, I mean, absolutely, things have, after you realize some things, when things settle. But how has that point, that quote unquote loss, actually propelled you into who you are today?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know at the time when it happened that it was truly God's plan. And I fortunately grew up in an environment where, that a lot of times we realize it's not our timing, it's God's timing. And I lived that out. And I remember in the ring that day, I remember I blanked out quickly when Michael Buffer made the announcement that I didn't get the decision, and there was an uproar in the casino, and a lot of Delawareans and Philadelphians and fans from the area came to support me. And I just remember that day, and then right after the decision was announced, and Bernard Hopkins and Donald Trump, all these fans were at ringside, and supporters were at ringside. And Donald Trump, oddly enough, the book that was written on me, the two guys happened to be Biden and Trump in the book. It's kind of odd. Think about that many years ago.
Yeah.
And he hosted a lot of the fights in the casinos, and he was a fan of the fight game. So, but when the decision was announced, I just remember I was stunned initially because Tony was sitting on a stool and they had to carry him out of the ring because he was injured, and I just remember saying, Lord, how could this happen? How could you let this happen? Because I thought this could be used, not realizing his plan was so much bigger than mine.
Absolutely.
And I remember when the fans carried me out of the ring, and then as I was heading out of the ring, I remember my wife, and she said she doesn't remember saying it. She said it truly had to be God. She said, Dave, I did not say that. And I just remember her saying, which was comforting, this is not your plan, this is God's plan. And I remember, and she said, Dave, I did not say that. So we went back and forth and debated about it. But I said, you never win. So I said, I said, but I always remembered that. And I said, wow, that was such a comfort, because I got in the way of Dave Tiberi after that decision in a selfish way, thinking it's me. And then all of a sudden it humbled me so quick when that comment was made. And she said, no, I never said that. So I said, it had to be preordained, because right after that happened, Bob Arum of Top Rank Boxing, who was promoting the fight, he immediately had a press conference with me after the fight and said, we will not hold he said, we are not going to hold a fight until you get a rematch with James Toney. Immediately then Donald Trump had a press conference with me and said, I will not hold a fight in any of my casinos until this decision is overturned. Yeah. Then there was millions of people that responded, that were outraged on ABC Water Sports. So I couldn't have written a better script. U.S. Senator Roth from Delaware actually happened to be the head of the subcommittee on investigations, which is the only body in the U.S. Senate could investigate the fight. He said he wasn't the fight fan. His wife was the fight fan. She's a judge. So I couldn't have written this script.
Right.
And so I knew at that time that this was not my plan. This was part of a bigger plan to finally bring boxing into an era of all the professional sports. Because a lot of people, through that fight, a lot of people didn't even know that boxing is the only major sport that does not have a national commission. Mm-hmm. A lot of people they didn't know that, for example, when Mike Tyson was incarcerated and got out of jail, the promoter didn't fight him in a state that had a stronger licensing. He fought him in Tennessee, which was weak on rules.
Right.
So there was a lot of things that were, I think, exposed through all this. And so then when New Jersey wouldn't do anything, Senator Roth continued on with the subcommittee on investigations. When he launched the investigation, the lawyers that were investigating the subcommittee on investigations were investigating the fight. They found out that the two judges that awarded James Toney the fight were unlicensed in New Jersey. They found out that the referee was considered green and incompetent to do a championship fight. And in that fight, he deducted a point without a warning, and that would have still gave me the fight. So a lot of the rules are broken. And then what was really tough for me is if it wasn't for my wife, it would have been a lot easier to go back into the ring. But I felt in my heart of hearts it wasn't the right thing to do at the time. And the stronger stance I took, the more they went against me. So then Bob Arum, then the offer got over $1 million. Then he offered me $1 million and 2% of pay-per-view. It became a money issue instead of a moral issue, and that really fired me up.
Right.
And I was on CNBC with Tom Snyder, and so the more exposure I was getting on Sports Illustrated and all these other things, the more exposure I was getting, the more controversy it was brewing, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. But when there's darkness, you shine light. I mean, what really inspired me was the number of boxers in our country and our world that suffer illiteracy. Through all this, I started seeing, wow, I'm representing a community that is really being targeted.
Right.
I mean, I was looking at this saying, God was using me at this time, moving ahead. We are in a society right now where these boxers, they couldn't read contracts. And so I ended up working with the subcommittee on investigations. And then within 10 years of the fight, then it led to the first ever boxing bill that was signed by President Clinton called the Ali Bill. And it was incredible because, they were saying, why wasn't it called the Tiberi Bill? I said, hey, man, I'm a fan of Ali. The bottom line is Ali stood by the bill. You couldn't get a better name in boxing or outside of boxing than Muhammad Ali. So to be able to be aligned with guys like Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, some of the greatest fighters of all time, and doing the right thing to say, let's straighten this sport up. Now, will I ever make the money that I turned down? No, I walked out at the peak when I was ready to start making a tremendous amount of money. But making it a money issue when you're doing things in the dark and knowing it's wrong and not... And by no means, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I just knew that I had to be used at a time in a season that needed to be done. If not, fighters would still be affected today like they were back then. And so there was a lot of good that came out of it. And, I think sometimes, even in our boys and girls clubs and with our youth, there's times in your life that you've got to take the higher road. And no matter what decisions that you make, you can never look back. You're going to say, I could have, I should have, I would have. But those mistakes, ultimately, when you're not making the right decisions, are going to haunt you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, wow. I mean, we need to go to commercial break. That was so good. We don't have no sponsors yet. But just from that perspective, I had this thing called Failures and Goals, or Failure is Dope, right? This concept that I have basically where we say that, certain failures are actually the greatest adversary for your success, because that's where you learn certain things. And I always say sometimes things don't happen to you, they're happening for you. Mm-hmm. Such an example as you, right? I think that loss, as you say, like that was God's plan. Mm-hmm. Now, how long did it take for you to realize that was the plan and to kind of get over the situation and just kind of move your life in a different direction?
It was interesting. I was looking at, I had a baby at home, and I was looking at the economics.
Millions of dollars.
Yeah, so I was looking at the economic side, and then I'm looking at an offer from Roy Jones, and we were looking at the guys at our time. That was the peak. That was the top guys in the world, and I'm there with them. I'm one of those 3 or 4. And I remember one day I threw my sweatsuit on and I went for a long jog, and it really bothered me because I didn't feel the spark, and I didn't feel the fire, and my buddies are like, "Get over the fire, man! Just go in for the money." I said, "I would never do that to me or my fans. I would never do it to people that supported me." And then I realized, wow, that fire that I've always had to get there when I got there, and that fire that kept me motivated, and it was tough because I come from a home where my father was, some people call today very abusive, and so I remember those days, and I'm like, you know what, I want it better for my kids, I want it better, and then that I was in that position right now, but I thought, wait a minute, I'm not going to look short term. I know whatever I do in life, I'm going to do well, because I made my mind up. That's what I'm going to do. You have a choice in life. You could say, if who you put yourself around, I mean, it creates opportunities for you. And I knew that whatever I did that in boxing. I put myself around the best in the world. Bernard Hopkins, Prince Charles Williams, Stevie Little, all become Bam Bam Hines. My team all became world champions, because the Bible says iron sharpens iron. And I do it in business. If somebody wants to go in a gray area, I don't want to go there. Hey, listen, everything to me is black and white. If you're going to do something, let's do it right, and let's get it done right, and let's go. That's what I'm going to outwork you, out hustle you. I'm going to do whatever I can to do it right, but at the same time, that everybody on the team wins. And that's that same philosophy I did in boxing, I carried into the business world, and we've been blessed. We've been very successful.
Like you said, you have been very successful using that same mentality. And I was an athlete. I played college football at Delaware State University.
Good size?
A little bit. I used to be like huge, you know what I mean? But I don't want to be that as big.
What coach did you have?
I was under two coaches, so Coach Blackman and Coach Levan. Al Levan.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he was really, yeah. He taught me so much about life. And that's why that's what the true coaches are, is the coaches who teach you about life. And at the time you're an athlete, he used to talk for every practice for like an hour. And we used to start on our knees, but by the end of it, everybody's standing up. But he had so many good sayings, so many teachings that we say now, and as adults, we're like, oh, we got it, but he would just say it too much. And then now it just really clicks. It's like boom, boom, boom. Like free lunch is still $1.
Just penetrated, right?
It's penetrated. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I was always the type of person where I'm very philosophical and I'm thinking, a critical thinker. So when people say certain things, I'm dissecting it. I'm taking it as a sponge and using it to so many forms of life. Just stuff that you just said, like how you use boxing to translate that into your success, into your career, which we're going to go talk about right now. I know right now you have the emergency protocol, but before that, how did we get there? When you left boxing, where did you go? So
it was interesting because I sat with my wife, and fortunately she was a dental hygienist. She made decent money, and so but she was a new mother, and so she really wanted to dedicate her time to our oldest, and then we ended up 3 years later having our second child, and of course 3 years after that our third child. But early on, I think it was important for us to, whatever decision we made together, and so we ended up. She knew our love of TV. I ended up. A friend, when I was 18, took me under his wing, and I was blessed for 22 years as a talk show host at a local cable show. But what was neat is I learned so much about the TV business, and it was on local cable. So then I said, I'm like very ambitious, and I'm like, I don't like how they're doing the production. I'm going to build. So the facility you're in today was a TV studio for many years, and so.
We see a bunch of TVs in here now. Yeah, okay, yeah. I was like, whoa, is this the Pentagon of Delaware? What's going on here? Hold on, is that my house? But go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's my house. It's my buddy's house.
Right.
So we ended up we built a TV studio, and when we built a TV studio, we started producing our own. We did everything here, our own commercials, and by the time we realized there's seasons, I used the word earlier, there's seasons in everything. And I remember when cell phones at the time were coming out hot. And I was like, and everybody started producing things on their own cell phones. So there was a time and season that we my wife and I talked about. We're like, wow, we started seeing the numbers dwindle. Because from the TV shows, we then started producing training videos, safety videos, interactive CDs, DVDs. We started doing national credit card commercials at the time. That there was credit cards everywhere, companies around here everywhere. So we started producing some high level. We started doing a ton of political ads for both parties, and it was interesting. That was pretty draining because psychologically, I'm more of a positive person, and I don't like trashing things. And when in politics can get kind of dirty, and that's really hard for me. So, but from the TV end, it was such a great experience, and the experience that we had there, it was just. I think it was good because we did so many things on our show. Our shows were built. My wife had a show called Delaware Women Weekly. She would interview women politicians, women doctors, women housewives that really, a housewife has the hardest job in America. And so we would have these shows, and it was just such a great experience. And so as we were doing the production side of it, we were like, wow, we're starting to see this start to get cut off a little bit because we noticed the state stopped hiring us as much. And so I think people started doing it on their own with production, and even though there's some great local production companies still here in Delaware today, we found for ourselves that we saw God open another door. And since we already understood cameras and production, Colonel Ellensworth, my Little League baseball coach, had me come down to Police Academy and start training the recruits many, many years ago. And so it really was fit for us to move into security. And so we started evaluating.
How did that conversation go with your wife? Hey, how was that conversation to transition to security?
You're going to love this. Her father and grandfather both retired from that industry.
Wow.
So there was everything. It was just, I couldn't have.
Goes back to God's plan.
Yeah, exactly. The script. I mean, I get ahead of God and skin my knees up all the time. I make mistakes. I do things. But I always say, Lord, let me go before me, because when I go before him, I always do something stupid. I'll skin my knees up, and then I also being patient. As Lord, open the door you want me in, not where I want to be in. Because if I pick the door to go in, I'm always going to probably make mistakes. But when I'm patient and I seek God's plan, he tends to be, he's a faithful and good God. And so Angela, my wife, was so supportive because her dad and grandfather, she grew up. She's our CEO, not by title only. She goes out on jobs. She does the infrastructure book work at the company. And what's neat about it is we've had our facility here. We've met with leaders of the NAACP, ACLU, Police Chiefs Council. I want the community to buy into this. I have clergy here all the time. We call it camera-friendly schools. We call it camera-friendly communities. People want to feel safe where they are. Mm-hmm. We're not Big Brother watching. Our goal was to do something good in the community. So if a young boy's doing something stupid, maybe that clergy can look at the camera and know the kid and go talk to him. It doesn't have to be cops and this and that. It could getting the community more in regards to our outreach and the things that we're doing. And it has been a blessing to see the things that we've been involved with. We've been involved with the center solving 3 murders, where the families had closure. Mm-hmm. So those are the positive things that we do here. But so that transition was to your question. That transition was a lot easier only because I think too she understood what her father and grandfather did for all those years.
Absolutely. So with the security system that you do have, how is it set up? Do you have cameras all around the city, all around? Like, how is that set up? For layman terms for me.
All right, so we don't do residential. We do apartment complexes. We do shopping centers. So if you think about, like, let's say you say, Dave, listen, I'm building my podcast company now. Where we just bought a facility. We would come in and you would identify areas of concern. For example, the IT room is always an area you definitely want a camera, because God forbid that's where you're storing all your servers and everything is going to be fed there, your mm-hmm. books, your finances. So we look at areas, sometimes people like common areas, sidewalks, where dumpsters are a big one because illegal dumping is so big. So we catch a lot of illegal dumping, people coming up to other people's properties and using their dumpster. And so it's being able to identify areas on the property. And what we're finding out now too is access control has been a big seller of ours. We go into properties and apartment complexes, so that way too, the access control, the organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, they can control what times, days and nights people can come in. And then if somebody goes ahead and they move from the apartment, then they could just shut the key. Where if you have a regular key, it takes, all of a sudden they lose it, you're stuck.
Right.
Now with the keys, you just shut it off and put another one. So that's why we're modeling hotels and other facilities that have done it for years. And so the access control is a pretty neat thing too, to tie in with what we're doing. But the monitoring is the fun part, because the young people come here and they want to sit here and they want to learn how to check systems. They want to learn how to capture footage, and it's a fun business. We probably right now deal with about 3,000 cameras daily that we feed in here.
Wow, that's amazing. And look, like I said, folks out there, it is a complete control room. I thought I was like, you watch like those movies like Air Force One, and they be in there, got all the cameras and the Navy and all that stuff. That's what it looks like right behind us. I mean, definitely congratulations on that and building that. And I know we talked a little bit as far as like outreach, giving back to the community. I know you were on the board at the Boys and Girls Club. Are you still on the board now?
Still on the board.
Still on the board now at the Boys and Girls Club. So one thing about it, I could probably talk to you for hours. Just picking your brain, asking you questions. But I definitely don't want to hold you up too much.
No, this is enjoyable. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So since you giving into everything, can I get a loan? No, I'm kidding. Nah, you gonna do it? No.
Is this a go, right?
It's a go. So with the Boys and Girls Club, I'm a proud alumni of Boys and Girls Club of Delaware. I grew up
Jackson Street.
Jackson Street. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely. And I was Brown. And Jackson Street and Browns were so important. Frames as well. We're talking about the inner city, the youth. I always tell people all the time, even my friends, we were just talking this morning, the Boys and Girls Club literally saved our lives because where we grew up, I'm a Section 8 kid. We grew up in this type of neighborhood. You like you said, you grew up in rough neighborhoods. And it's income based. Mainly everybody on the block is income based, Section 8 or whatever. And those type of neighborhoods, you need outlets. And the Boys and Girls Club was our outlet for us. How important was it to you growing up at Jackson Street?
It was really important. The Jackson Street, back then, the downstairs, they converted into a boxing gym. So it allowed us to, not just us, but the many friends that I through Wilmington, Newcastle, it drew, I think, a lot of people because they offered the boxing downstairs. But it allowed us to, at nighttime, to vet and go shoot hoops and do other things. Otherwise, there's a lot of kids. We could be on the streets and doing things we probably shouldn't be doing. And the club with giving us the structure, I think, is important. Where you have leaders in the clubs, such as Jackson Street, that really cared. And I remember Jimmy Lancaster. I bring his name up a lot for the Boys and Girls Club. Jimmy dedicated his life. I think he died at like 90 years old, but he was a legendary boxer. But he also encouraged the kids to go upstairs and be at the homework club and other programs. And I look at some of my friends now that are just retiring from the Wilmington Fire Department and seeing the things that they've achieved. And they're like us. They're always like, wow, if the Jackson Street Club was not there, what would have happened to us guys? Because we were knuckleheads. We would have done some stupid things.
Right, absolutely.
And our personalities were A personalities. So, when we did things, we got it done. And so that sometimes can be a negative if you're not in the right environment. So,
right.
And I think the fact that they did care enough to be able to talk to us and encourage us. And it was interesting. There was a lot of volunteers at the time that were participating and of course, staff. So
absolutely. I mean, the staff was the most underrated aspect of the Boys and Girls Club because you had people, and it wasn't like, in no shade to anyone who's working at the Boys and Girls Club right now or even back in the day, it's not as if you're getting paid six figures, like as far as the people who are really hands-on, the tutors and these type of, they're not getting paid six figures, and they're giving back just out of kindness of their hearts most of the time to some kids who were stubborn. We don't know at the time, a kid who's 8, 9, 10 years old, 11, 12, 13, you don't understand certain things about the world, and that who's ever trying to feed into you is trying to give you something good for the world. You don't know at the time. You realize later, what I mean, as you're growing into them, and they just trying to sow those seeds into you. So it was so important. I mean, we had this thing called Smart Moves. I don't know if you remember Smart Moves. It was a lady named Miss Jill. And granted, Brown's Boys and Girls was on the north side. It's a predominantly black neighborhood. And she was this skinny white lady who came to the Boys and Girls Club who cared so much about us. Yeah. And we was like, wow, for her to come into the Boys and Girls Club, Browns. I mean, she's driving and coming into
and you probably saw that as a kid too, which is really powerful.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I seen her about 3 years ago for the first time since I seen her when I was a kid. And it was at a wedding. I was, I did photography and video. I was doing a wedding. And I was like, Miss Jill. She was like, oh my gosh, Blake. Oh, she even bigger. And my sister was there with me too. My sister loved her. So, and we was like, wow, you don't know how important Smart Moves was for us and what it did for us. Mm-hmm. And I know that the Boys and Girls Club has changed a little bit and has evolved a little bit now. Where do you see the Boys and Girls Club going to have these programs that can kind of give to kids even more to kind of propel them in different directions?
Well, I think our society, and there's been a lot of pressure. The COVID, I think, also was a shocker to thousands of people just in our state, not alone in the nation. There's millions of people that were affected, and many families personally were affected. And when I looked at how the Boys and Girls Club, the programs such as the daycares and other programs that are valuable to families, young families, for example, I think it's not just a kid at 18, but when you go to the Frames Club and you see that our clubs are reaching out to senior citizens and giving them, because there's a lot of seniors that are lonely. And then you go over there and you see them in a swimming pool swimming. And so being able to reach all, and I think that's, they've always done a great job reaching youth, but to see that we're going into the young families and now we're speaking into the hearts of young parents as well as their children, their babies. Mm-hmm. So being able to get the babies at a young age and really do what the Boys and Girls Club do well. And to those kids, they're being read to, imagine a kid by the time they're in kindergarten or first grade, and they're going to be equipped and they're going to be ahead of others in their class because of our clubs.
Absolutely.
And then when you're in your later years and you're in your 70s and 80s and you're lonely, and you find a place that you can go, and the clubs have opened their doors. Like I use Frames as an example, and the partnerships like the Newark Club, the partnerships with like Caravelle Academy and local schools, and we're in schools now where we're after school. You don't just have to attend a club or go to a club. We have after school programs, which I think is powerful. Now we're in the schools setting up programs, so when the kid doesn't even have to leave the school.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't get any better to have the great local and national programs that the Boys and Girls Clubs offer, but now to be able to open that portfolio up and say, we're going to do more than this, and we're going to go into schools and into communities to impact them even more. So,
absolutely.
Powerful.
Like I said, I know you got, your time is very limited, but here's a quick question for you. Like you said, we have to get back and get to these communities. What do you think that the community can do to help the Boys and Girls Club, help the community?
I think everybody, there's three areas. It's I heard my old pastor say this, and he said everything that we do, and this is so true for our many clubs throughout the 3 counties: time, talent, treasure. Every single one of us could do one of them.
Right.
And right now, I serve on multiple boards of different organizations. I created a group called Donate Delaware, where we just raised over 2 million PPE since last March to get back to our communities. And all of us can do something. And so if we look at time, talent, and treasure, and so I don't have time. Well, can you make a commitment of $5 a month to our clubs? All right. You have talent. You can't block one day a week out or every other week to do a homework club with the kid at a club. So there are so many ways, but if everyone would just take this home with them and say, time, talent, treasure, what area can I help in? And so the 3 T's. And so I remember my pastor said that years ago at the church, and to me, it's just so fitting for our Boys and Girls Clubs because I go out and I have friends that are mechanics. I don't have anything. You do have something to offer. There's kids that love their cars.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could go on and on. My sister was a teacher at Hodson for years. She teaches cosmetology. There's, the young boys and girls would love to learn how to cut hair or, manicures and pedicures and whatever it may be. And that's the time, talent, and treasure. If we can use those 3 T's, and every time we approach somebody and they say, well, what can I do? I can't do it. No, you can. Do you have time? Well, can you give us one day a month or 1 hour a month? And,
right.
But I think once, Blake is so powerful because that question is, if we just get them in our clubs, it's addictive. It's a good addiction.
Right.
When you get in, you're going to want to do something.
Absolutely.
Because
by seeing the kids.
Just seeing the kids and seeing the directors, that they don't make a ton of money, but their love of the children. And then being able to be a part of that is so powerful.
Absolutely. I was just in the Boys and Girls Club. Went to Browns yesterday. And just seeing the kids, and I just see myself. Mm-hmm. You're like, look at these kids. You know what I mean? Like you want to give them, especially my mindset. Like I'm like you. I'm very soft-hearted. Always want to help people. Always felt like my purpose was to help people. Like and that's a whole nother different story. But just to see these kids, and I'm like, they need us. They need someone. So I love what you said about the 3 T's. I wrote it down right here, and I'm definitely going to take that. I'm stealing that. So
no,
shout out to you, Pastor.
Definitely, because if we all work together for thoughts and ideas like this, because I feel like right now, my 3 girls they've saved their money when they were in high school and college, and I just remembered that as they saved their money, they always wanted to fly somewhere and go somewhere. They just wanted to see the world, and I really believe that's one reason that a lot of young people in our clubs, you don't see prejudices. Why? Because they're introduced to a melting pot of people. I used to joke about like the United Nations. There's people from all over. You get to learn cultures. You get to learn. And I really believe when people are caught in their own little area and that's all they know, it's easy to get your prejudices. But when you're introduced to areas, I lived in camps with Hispanics and blacks, and we were all family. We were all a team.
Right.
And that, to me, the Boys and Girls Club are about teams. It's about getting together. Let's do this together. Let's make things happen. And we see great results.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I think that it's a strong testimony of the commitment of leadership like George Kapansky and John Wellens. And there's just so many good people at our clubs. And getting these kids in, or adults, especially as you're touching on, getting the adults to our clubs and introduced to our clubs, to me, should be front and foremost with our companies. Then after company employees, get involved with our clubs, and once they're in there, they're going to be attached.
Absolutely. You gave me an idea that I'm gonna try later on. Not even try, we're gonna do. Listen, one last question for you. I got you. Like I said, this podcast, I always like to ask people, like overcoming things, right? So I'm gonna ask you this question. You might have to think on it. You might know it at the top of your head. What has been the greatest struggle you had to overcome? And then how did you use that?
I think my father my father was a hardworking man, but he was also very physical growing up. And I think early on, he struck us, and it gave me a fear as a child. And if probably it wasn't for the church, God doesn't give us the spirit of fear. He gives us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And I just, my message to our young people and even adults a lot of times that need to hear this, because sometimes if you're not careful with that fear, it becomes bitterness and hate. And so I just remember that God gave me peace over that, and it really helped me, because my old trainer, Marty Feldman, said, "Hey, Dave," he said, "imagine the opponent." God put people in my life like Gus and Marty Feldman and Ernie, older men that in my young career that started speaking truth, and it contradicted the negative that I had in my mind. And I would say then, knowing that through my church time that we're more than conquerors, is I had to start claiming these things. And when I started claiming them, I went into the ring as a lion, not as a sheep. And but so much of it, they were like, people see tapes of me and they're like, man, you were a beast. And I'm like, you know what? I had to make the spirit and mind alteration. And Zig Ziglar, the famous writer, said, we need to do it. Zig. Oh, Zig's phenomenal. He said, we need to.
All of them guys.
You're going to love this quote because you probably remember it when you read Zig. We need to, every single day of our lives, do a checkup from the neck up. And to me, that's all. If we start doing that, the way we treat people, the way we talk to people, the way we love people, I'm not going to make somebody else's problem my problem. And when somebody wants to get all irritated and everything else, then I have no problem to walk away. You know what? I'm going to be there to love you if you want to be loved. Right. But I am not going to be a sourpuss. I'm not going to be the one. And so that's such a powerful question, because I feel like, when I look at my childhood and then as I got older, and my church, and of course Ernie and the guys in my life, and Andy Urkel, and they would always end up, before I went in the ring, Marty said, the problem with this fight is, he said, do you know why your opponent made the mistake? I said, what's that? He said, he made the mistake of showing up. Does he know he's fighting you? And then, but it was empowerment. It was telling me, Dave, you know what? But then the compliment what Marty said is, with the pastor and what the Bible was saying, you're more than a conqueror. You can do all things. That was my favorite verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do, now he doesn't say some things, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When I think of those verses, I not only think about them, but I claim them, because that's mine. Right. And, when I claim it, but when I go in and do what I have to do, and then we have a society today that in a lot of cases there's families struggling. And I had a choice to make, and I can ramble on this, but I had a choice to make that I could pass to my 3 daughters what was passed to me. And I said, I'm not going to pass that curse on to my 3 daughters. I am not going to strike my daughters. I'm going to communicate with my daughters. I'm going to love my daughters. I'm going to empower my daughters. I'm going to claim victory over my daughters. And my wife and I were in agreement. So when we came into agreement, it's called done. The Bible says when more than 2 of us shall come in agreement, we call it done. So when we came together, my wife and I confirmed that we are going to love our kids. We're going to empower our kids and encourage our kids. Our girls are very balanced. They're very strong. And And that's why I said, I don't care if somebody at our clubs or if anybody's battling, listen to this cast, if anybody's struggling, then you need to pull back and say, do the Zig Ziglar, to check up from the neck up, self-evaluate and say, wait a minute, am I living in the past? Am I living what my aunt told me, what my grandmom told me, what my dad told me? Or am I living in the future where I'm going to say, I know I'm going after that and I'm going to go after it? But if you're going to keep living in the past, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to continue to walk in mud, in quicksand.
Absolutely.
So,
listen, that was great, man. Listen, I can ask you 30 more questions. We'll probably be a 2-hour podcast. It'd be like, that's too long. But listen, Dave, it has been tremendous opportunity to interview you. Great energy.
Enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh, this has been amazing, man.
Yeah, this has been very
I told you we can keep going, man. We can keep going, but I know we got to go.
Well, this won't be our last. So
this won't be our last. So we're definitely gonna do like a part 2, part 4. It's gonna be like a boxing match. You know, go get in there.
That's right.
Well, listen, Dave, I appreciate you. You guys have been listening to the Boys and Girls Club Delaware podcast. I'm your host, Blake the Brain. Dave Tiberi.
Thank you.
Let's go. Perfect.